The battlefield had fallen silent. Not with peace, but with exhaustion. It was the year 261 BCE, on the plains of Kalinga. Smoke still drifted over the broken ground. Bodies lay where they had fallen, soldiers, farmers, children. The river nearby ran dark, thick with mud and blood. At the center of it all stood a king. Ashoka Maurya had just won the greatest victory of his life. His empire now stretched further than any ruler in India before him. The conquest was complete. The enemy was crushed. And yet, he did not move. Ancient records later claim that he walked through the field in silence, looking at what remained of his triumph. Tens of thousands were dead. Many more had been taken away in chains. And in that moment, something shifted. Because this was not the beginning of his greatness. It was the moment he began to question it. If this was victory, what did defeat look like? History often remembered Ashoka as the good king. The emperor who embraced peace. The ruler who turned to wisdom and compassion after a life of violence. But that version, while comforting, was incomplete. It hid the darker truth of who he had been, and how far he had fallen before he rose. It softened the brutality of his early rule. And it overlooked the political intelligence behind his transformation. In reality, Ashoka was not simply a man who changed. He was a man who rebuilt himself, carefully, deliberately, and at a cost few understood. In this story, three things would come into focus. First, the ruthless prince he was before the world called him great. Second, the hidden strategy behind his embrace of peace. And third, the quiet ways his ideas reshaped an entire civilization. So the question was not whether Ashoka changed. The real question was this. Did he truly renounce power, or did he discover a new way to use it? Long before Ashoka stood on that battlefield, the Mauryan Empire was already one of the largest political forces in the ancient world. It had been built by his grandfather, Chandragupta Maurya, through conquest, alliances, and strict control. At its height, the empire stretched across much of the Indian subcontinent. It was governed by a powerful central authority, supported by a complex system of officials, spies, and regional governors. Order was maintained through discipline, and often through fear. This was not a gentle world. Life for ordinary people depended heavily on their position. Farmers worked the land under state supervision. Traders moved goods across vast distances, but paid heavy taxes. Punishments for crime were severe, designed not only to correct but to deter. Power, in this system, was absolute. And it demanded strength. Into this world, Ashoka was born, not as the chosen heir, but as one of many princes. His early life was shaped by competition, suspicion, and constant pressure to prove himself. Ancient sources described him as intelligent, but also harsh. Some accounts even suggested that he was sent away from the capital because his own father found him difficult to control. One story, though debated, claimed that he earned the nickname Chand Ashoka, Ashoka the Fierce. Whether this name was fully accurate or not, it revealed how he was perceived. Not as a philosopher. Not as a reformer. But as a man willing to do what others would not. And in the struggle for power, that was often enough. By the time he claimed the throne, after what many believed was a violent succession struggle, Ashoka had already learned one lesson clearly. In this world, mercy did not secure power. Force did. His rise began not with peace, but with control. As a young ruler, Ashoka faced a restless empire. Some regions resisted Mauryan authority. Others tested his strength. Among them, Kalinga stood apart, independent, proud, and strategically important. For Ashoka, leaving it unconquered was a risk. So he made a decision. The campaign against Kalinga was not just another war. It was a statement. A message to every region watching closely. The battle that followed was devastating. Ancient inscriptions later recorded that over 100,000 people were killed, and many more were displaced. Entire communities were destroyed. Ashoka had proven his power. But at what cost? In his own words, preserved in rock edicts across the empire, he later admitted, "Even 100th or 1,000th part of those who were killed is now considered very grievous." This was not a public speech. It was a confession carved into stone. And it marked a turning point. Because after Kalinga, Ashoka did something no emperor before him had done. He stopped. At the height of his power, he chose a different path. Instead of expanding his empire through war, he turned toward what he called Dhamma, a moral law rooted in compassion, self-control, and respect for all life. But this was not a sudden transformation of a broken man. It was a calculated redefinition of kingship. Ashoka did not abandon power. He reshaped it. He ordered the carving of edicts across his empire, messages written in local languages, placed where ordinary people could see them. In these, he spoke not of conquest, but of duty. Not of fear, but of responsibility. He banned certain forms of animal sacrifice. He promoted religious tolerance. He encouraged officials to act with fairness and care. For the first time, an emperor was speaking directly to his people, not as subjects to control, but as lives to guide. And yet, questions remained. Was this compassion genuine? Or was it a new kind of authority, one that ruled not through fear, but through belief? At his peak, Ashoka governed one of the largest empires of the ancient world without expanding its borders further. Instead, he invested in roads, rest houses, and medical care, not only for humans, but for animals as well. He sent envoys beyond his empire, carrying not armies, but ideas. Some traveled as far as Sri Lanka, spreading Buddhist teachings that would shape entire cultures. This was his greatest achievement. He had turned an empire of conquest into an empire of influence. But even this came with a cost. Maintaining such a vast territory without constant expansion placed strain on the system. Some historians later argued that his focus on moral governance weakened the military edge of the empire. Others questioned whether his reforms reached every corner, or remained strongest near the center of power. And then there was the personal cost. Ashoka, once feared, had to redefine himself in the eyes of those who knew him as ruthless. Trust, once broken, was not easily rebuilt. The man who had conquered Kalinga now had to live with its memory. That was the price of transformation. In his final years, the empire remained vast, but its future was uncertain. Ashoka's death did not bring a dramatic collapse. But slowly, over time, the strength he had held together began to weaken. Without his presence, the balance between power and principle became harder to maintain. The empire he had reshaped would not last long after him. And so the question returned. Was his path sustainable, or was it tied only to the man himself? In the end, Ashoka's story did not close with conquest, but with reflection. He had begun as a prince shaped by violence, risen as a king defined by power, and ended as a ruler searching for meaning beyond it. The battlefield of Kalinga never left him. It became the foundation of everything that followed. His answer to that moment was not to forget it, but to transform it into something else. So when history asked whether his change was real, the evidence stood not in words, but in actions carved into stone, spread across a continent. He did not erase his past. He built upon it. Without Ashoka, the spread of Buddhism across Asia might have been slower, or taken a different form entirely. His support gave structure and reach to an idea that would travel far beyond his empire. His inscriptions remain among the earliest examples of rulers communicating directly with their people in a moral voice, not just a legal one. He redefined what power could look like. Not weaker, but different. And yet, history often simplified him. It remembered the peaceful king, but forgot the violent path that led there. It praised the transformation, but ignored the strategy behind it. Ashoka was not just a symbol of change. He was proof that power could evolve, but never disappear. That was his true legacy. So how should he be remembered? As a conqueror who felt regret? Or as a ruler who discovered a deeper form of control? Perhaps both. Because in the end, Ashoka did not choose between power and peace. He tried to hold them together. And that tension, more than any victory, defined his life. The question remains. Was Ashoka's transformation an act of moral awakening, or the most intelligent political decision of his reign? History has never fully agreed. If this story revealed something new, then the past is still speaking.